he was very much into, doing the right thing. I think he really believed that going to Vietnam was keeping communism away from the United States and defending, our country from the evils that he never wanted to see here.
And maybe would you mind sharing a little bit about how you feel about what he did for the military, like what your feelings are towards all of his service?
I'm proud. I would say that it's something we say, it's a club that nobody wants to join, being a Gold Star family member, because people just don't understand that it's a loss that's forever. He's been gone 47 years, and I will always have the same questions, and I will always wonder the same things about him until I die. And, you want people to have respect and honor and never forget them. You don't want to see people disrespecting our country or our flag. I think it's important that everybody understands that Gold Star families have a perspective as well.
Tell you about it.
So this is our Benny car, and we call it our Benny Parade car now. When Ben was at Fort Benning, his first deployment overseas, he had a Mustang, convertible Mustang. It was older, and it was stolen while he was deployed. And then the person that stole it got drunk and wrecked it. So we brought it home in pieces and put it out behind the barn, because we have several car parts out behind the barn. But then after the fourth deployment, when Ben was killed, my husband says, well, we can't get rid of that car. We're going to have to do something with it. What can we do? His brother had a Factory 5 Cobra that he had built, and he said, let's make a Cobra out of Ben's car. So this is what they made. They took every part that was in Ben's car, and they used all of the parts and pieces, and they created this Factory 5 Cobra. The frame and the actual fiberglass body is the only thing that came from the Cobra. Everything else is Ben's Mustang, all the way down to the windshield wipers, and the stereo and the speakers came out of Ben's car, because he was one of those loud speaker kids. We had the decals painted on the car that are all in memory of Ben. So it is an awesome parade car that we put big flags on, and we take it into the Memorial Day parade, and there's a couple other veteran parades in the area that we drive this. But more than that, we drive this car every day, even sometimes in the rain, because it rains real quick on us. But we drive this car, and we talk to people all the time, and this is our way of getting to share Ben forever. So it is a fun ride. It goes really fast, and that's the best part of it.
I think he felt that it was just a calling he had, that he felt deeply about serving. he joined the Army in the first place because he had a draft number that was going to get called up, and he wanted to go into military intelligence. So if he enlisted, he could go into military intelligence, and he didn't have to worry about, not doing something in the Army he felt he wanted to do. And it was 3 o'clock in the morning, and I got a knock on the door from a state trooper. And as soon as I saw him, I collapsed.
Yeah, you knew
because
what
I
that
knew.
meant. Yeah. Do you remember anything that was discussed, or was it kind of just a blur at that point?
It was somewhat of a blur. I called my pastor, like, as I said, it was 3 in the morning. I think I called my pastor at like 6 o'clock.
Good for you. You waited.
And so yeah, I did that, and he helped me, tell his mother. But before that, my husband's aunt took care of our kids while Jim and I worked, and she came over she usually got there about 7 o'clock, and I knew I needed my pastor there to help me tell her, because she fainted when I told her. She had been one of the people that took care of Jim a lot during the summers when he spent time with relatives, and they were very, very close. And so she just had a really tough time with it. I knew I needed to be strong for my kids. And that's all that was on my mind at the time, was I've got to be strong for my kids. I can't let them know I'm devastated.
Yeah.
And that was what was going through my mind this whole time.
And like when me and my mom used to argue, my brother, he'll be like the mediator. You know what I mean? So now we don't even have a mediator, so we have to figure this thing out on our own, So I just try to open my ears more, open my heart, listen, see where she's coming from. Because even though I lost a brother, she lost a son. And it's the same person, but it's two different things, So I just try to be more sentimental for that. But every day it's a struggle. Every day it's supposed to get easier, but it's like it gets worse. Because it's like you're used to being with somebody every day, talking to them every day, seeing them every day, and you go from seeing them every day, talking to them every day, to not doing that at all. So it's like you have to transition your life to live without that person, and you don't want to live without them. I don't know. It's hard. Like he would risk it all for someone he loved, you know what I mean? And that's how he felt about his country.
Yeah.
And it's just, feels like a loss, but he gained his wings, and now he can help me spiritually and see things that I can't see and help me out. But he was a hero. He was my hero. And he was the best brother I could ever have. And I don't regret anything about it. Good, bad, ugly, pretty. I loved it all. That was when Fort Bragg, when we went, after he graduated and stuff, when we went to go eat. This is when he got his teeth taken out. His mouth was so swole. He didn't even know I was taking those pictures.
Through all this, with watching the news and watching everything, we always tried to stay as positive as we could, and not look at anything and not think negatively about bad things happening. And we figured that he'd survived the bombing already and a lot of other stuff that we didn't even know about. We figured that, he was going to be okay. And we went out to dinner the same week on a Friday, and we went out to dinner, and we came home, and there was a van parked across the street. And at the time, there had been some home break-ins at the time with some guys posing as magazine salesmen. So I kind of had that in my mind, and I didn't take my eye off this van and looking at it through the rearview mirror. And we pulled into our driveway, and not soon after that, 2 Marines hopped out, officer and another Marine. So yeah, we kind of knew right there. And as soon as they started walking across the street, we were just, you know, don't come over here.
I tried to run in the house. I figured if I made it into the house, shut the door, wouldn't be
At
true.
that point, I couldn't even get the keys out. And she wanted to know how bad. You know, we kind of knew already. They don't send an officer and another Marine to your house to notify injury. So anyway, we got inside and we talked to him. And the only thing I was telling him was, I just talked to him. You guys have to be wrong, you know. I just talked to him, and they said no, and they had a military death confirmation sheet with them. And when
prisoners were taken from Bilibid prison, the prisoners were taken from the camp to Japan. And right off of Japan is where it was bombed. So anyone on
Oh, I see.
in its earlier days in the prison camp, I loved it because I know that he must have some sense of humor. But somehow some of the prisoners got a hold of American currency, and he said he took a $500 bill and put a cigarette in his mouth, and this is what he used to light it. I loved it. That was great. And the Red Cross was wonderful. The packages from the Red Cross took a long time for mail to get there, and I don't know. He sent postcards to all of us.
After his capture.
Yes, he sent postcards to all of us, and one of my daughters has one in her house that's a double-sided glass, so you can see the front of the postcard, and then you turn it, and then it's the message to me. We all came away from his death with different memories, and I know that after my mother died, we sat in the living room, the home that we were all grew up in, and laughed about crazy things, and it just but there was not a lot of laughter after we learned, or any laughter after we learned of the death of my father. And but I know they're together.
You went into denial and stood at attention immediately thereafter.
Yes.
When was it that you let yourself feel?
I didn't for years. I was in a denial, too busy raising my children, thinking of them and them only, and then what am I going to do? You know, it's like I'm going to go backwards in time, trying to support these kids. And back in time when he died, we didn't have a lot of the benefits or support that we do today. So I ended up paying some of the expenses for their college, you know, at 8% interest loan or whatever. But that's what you did back then. And I was more concerned on providing for them. And I didn't grieve. It took me a long time. I don't think it's just until recently that I finally, in the holidays, it'll touch my heart in a real way.
What are other things you do throughout the year to help preserve his memory and legacy?
Well, I recently gave my little grandchildren buttons with because the organization No Greater Love was a big supporter of us for 20 years with the Kuwaiti Embassy. And each year that they did their program, the ambassador from Kuwait and Carmela Laspada of No Greater Love would come together and host the Gold Star or the Gulf War families that weekend or one weekend out of the year. And they would give us a little button with our loved one's name. And so I've given my grandchildren, 5 grandchildren, one apiece and said, now, when it's Veterans Day, I want you to wear it to school, because today now they're having the students, do more for the veterans and be more patriotic, and so we're never forgotten.
Daniel always kind of kidded with me a lot about things, and I never quite knew where he stood on me joining the military. He did write me a lot whenever I was mobilized, which was really nice. He wrote me from basic training, and that was unexpected. I would just get random letters from him, and I was like, I didn't even know he knew the address, but it was always really, really neat to get a letter from him. So I guess he was proud. He ended up going into convoy operations, which is the opposite end of what I was doing. I was doing the combat engineer related stuff where we were looking for explosives on the highway, and so he would actually be the individual that I was trying to protect. So it was, it was kind of a weird switch up. We're odd like that. We either are completely in sync, or going in opposite directions, which I guess is about the same thing. I don't know.
Why do you think he chose Marines?
Oh, I know exactly why he chose Marines. He chose the Marines because I was in the Army National Guard, and for Daniel, I know for a fact that he decided he was going to be in what he would consider the better branch. But also, I think it has something to do with the pastor that Daniel really admired when he was growing up. The pastor's name was Judd, and Judd had been in the Marines, and he had a lot of stories about being a pastor in the Marines, and Daniel had always admired that. And so I think somewhere in Daniel's mind, when he decided to join, he saw that there was a clear path to becoming what he wanted to be. Just like when I was trying to join. I wanted to get the college money. Daniel wanted to join the clergy. And so for Daniel, I'm sure he was thinking, this is my opportunity to join the clergy because I couldn't do this at the university level, so I'll just dive into this and then see as far as I can go, And even while he was there, I can remember stories that Buck would tell me. Buck was the individual that Daniel lived with when he was here in California. He would tell us, hey, Daniel would have such and such, like prayer service before we did this, or he would find out somebody's not doing well. He would go and pray with him. It's very different to what I did when I was growing up. I was very much the last person to walk into a church. And when I became this happened I think when I was 15. I'm a little foggy on the time, but when I was around the 15th year, I decided that I didn't want to go to church anymore. I decided that it wasn't the religion that I wanted, and it was for some personal reasons. They had done some things to Stephen that I didn't agree with, and so because I didn't agree with it, I just decided, you know what, I'll find something else. So I did. Dad got really mad about it, and just basically decided that inattention was the way to go. So he didn't acknowledge my presence or anything else. Daniel was quite the opposite. Daniel acknowledged every move that I made. He was always there saying, "Hey Nick, how's it going?" And always in my face about everything. And then when I turned 19, I came home. This is when we were working at Mylan Box. And I remember walking in the door, and Daniel was sitting down at the kitchen table, and it middle of the night, and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing up?" So, "Oh well, I'm just eating," and he was always eating. he wanted to he wanted to be a bodybuilder, and so he was constantly eating protein, and we were constantly obsessed with the world's strongest man competitions and stuff like that, right? And so he was just eating his random protein shake, and I walk in and he's like, "Oh, what's up?" And I was like, nothing." I was still irritated at Dad, and this is years later, and he was like, "What are you mad about?" I was like, something Dad said, and I was like, "We have this spat between the two of us, right?" And he was like, "What are you talking about?" I was like, "Because we in families, it's sometimes you talk about things, right? But other times there's that odd silence where you just know you're not going to talk about it, but that's the way you're talking about it." And so with Daniel and I, we never communicated, okay, this is the way this situation is, but he already knew. And so now it was his way of saying, okay, I'm going to actually open up this conversation. And so I was like, yeah, Dad doesn't really care for the fact that I'm not a Christian. And Daniel's like, "Well, what does that matter?" And I was like, "I don't know." And then Daniel stood up and he was like, "From now on, you be whatever you want to be because you're my brother." And he walked over to me and hugged me. And then he started praying about it. And he looked at me and he said, "I want you to pray in whatever religion you are, and we're going to seal this right now." And it kind of, in that moment, really kind of shook me, because that was right before he joined the Marines, and I felt a lot of acceptance in that moment from him, an acceptance that I guess I didn't have when we were younger, right? And it was a really, really beautiful moment. And after that, he downed the rest of his protein shake and went to bed, because that was just his way. Yeah. But it was a good moment. It was a really good moment. One that I'm proud of him for doing that.
Always really wanted to be a soldier.
Really?
He always did. He loved playing with the little green plastic soldiers, and he kind of marched his brothers around. He really always did, and as I said, he was a leader. His classmates looked up to him. He was dependable. And Todd showed a great deal of integrity when he was a young boy too. And we're a Christian family, and he was raised in church, and so he had morals and values that are, I think, important. So he always really was led that way. It was no surprise to us at all that Todd joined the military. And he actually attended New Mexico Military Institute in New Mexico. That's a wonderful high school. It's a boarding school. My husband went there, and so it's family tradition. Our youngest son went there. Our middle son chose not to, and I think sometimes he thinks maybe that he wishes he had. It's great development, and it is a prep school for the academies too, for West Point and Annapolis and some of those. Todd never thought about going to West Point or trying to get into West Point, but he really enjoyed his time at New Mexico Military Institute and rose to the ranks of leadership. And so he was there for his junior and senior year of high school and 2 years of junior college, because by then he had a scholarship, and he was practical also, and then he had some rank, and he was a leader, and so he thought, I'm staying. Yes. This is a picture of Todd when he was a little boy. He wore a cowboy hat all the time. He would sleep in a cowboy hat. He loved his cowboy hat. And this is a family picture when Todd was at Texas A&M, and we're all in front of our fireplace. This is a picture of Todd with Iraqi children. It's a little dark, but he's in the middle, and there is surrounded with children. And he's got, his thumbs up. And Todd flew a, Texas A&M flag on his Bradley or his tank. This is a picture of Todd when I believe he was at parachute school. And he was happy. He always smiled. And this is a little dark, but this is the night Todd returned from Iraq. My husband's in the picture. I'm giving Todd a big hug. And I remember wearing a pink shirt so he could see me. A lot of people had on red, white, and blue, and I thought. So here's a picture of Erica and Todd and myself after we got to hug his neck. And Todd is buried at our ranch. And this is a picture that a Vietnam veteran, Patrick Hughes, took. Patrick is very supportive of American Gold Star mothers, and he's always at our events taking pictures. And he came to New Mexico because he wanted to go to the Angel Fire Vietnam Memorial, which is really close to us, and also wanted to film the balloon fiesta, in New Mexico. So he came up to the ranch and took that wonderful picture by Todd's stone. This was in September, and he didn't get home until the spring of '04, and he thought he was going to get home before Christmas, but he said, plan a ticket home and a cold beer would be nice. And he talks about the days getting cooler. Some guys left their winter gear in Kuwait to travel in combat lighter. They will hate life in a few months. Me, I brought everything. I'm not getting packages, but hardly any of us are. I talked to Erica today. She is doing well, and she and I will have to really look hard to where we go next. I think the Army is reconstructing things so that whole units come out here to replace existing ones instead of soldiers PSCing and ETSing from here. I think we get our 6-month in a combat zone stripe in a month. We already got our combat patch. I miss you guys and think of you often. I wish I could call more.
It's been an honor to just be along for the ride, to be able to know this about the people that went before me, and to share the stories, to meet the people that served with my dad, and to know those stories. I hope I can pass them on to my kids. I hope this film helps to share a little bit of it, because we need people to make those commitments, to raise their hand and say, yeah, take me. And if my service to America has been with Sons and Daughters in Touch, I'll take that. It's not as much as wearing the uniform, but
just as important.
I'm proud of what we've been able to do, and to open eyes to the realization that war is hell. When we were on the trip to Vietnam, somebody described it more as the profession of arms, and the profession of arms is dangerous, and people die. And when people die, they leave behind sad families. I'm one of them, but we've turned out all right.
This is Dad taking an oath as a captain in the Air Force. And in all likelihood, that was done at Oxnard Air Force Base back in the early 1960s. In the fall of '61, this is Dad holding me on the day of my baptism, again in Oxnard, California. And this is a picture of Mom and the 5 kids. And I talk a lot about the 2 sets of grandparents being integral to our lives. This picture was taken in San Pedro on the porch of Mom's parents' home, the 5 kids. Jim was born 5 months after Dad was lost. And this picture was taken in the living room of Dad's parents' home in Santa Barbara. And both in the 1966 time frame. Again, if you think Jim was born in January of 1966, here he is a few months later.
Okay.
So Dad arrived in Southeast Asia on November 22nd, 1963, the day that President Kennedy was killed, and he was there assigned to the 1st Air Commando Squadron, flying B-26s in training missions in Southeast Asia, in Vietnam. He's located right here, and interestingly, the guy here in the sunglasses is Russ Bonner. Russ was the navigator in the other B-57, Jade 21, on that fateful mission.
Okay.
This is an image of some B-57s that were probably being transported from Vietnam to Clark Air Base or something like that. But some of the patches that Dad wore during his time in the Air Force.
Now tell me about these patches. Were these issued for certain missions that they flew on, or just certain groups they flew with?
This is certain groups that they flew with. This is the B-57. So again, he arrived November 63, flying B-26s for almost a year, and then in late 64, early 65, they transitioned in his second tour in a different assignment. They transitioned to B-57s. He was flying with the 13th Air Force, or 13th Bomb Squadron, and the 437th, I believe that was at Oxnard Air Force Base before he went to Vietnam. And then this is one of the patches, hand sewn, pretty classic stuff from early in his arrival in the Republic of Vietnam. This is the ID card that Dad had on him when his B-57 took off on that final mission. They went from Clark Air Base to Benoit, from Clark Air Base to Tan Son Nhut in Saigon, and then from there they went to Da Nang, got their orders for the bombing mission, and that's when, after that, they were lost. But this is the ID card that Dad had on him at that time. It survived the crash and any explosions that may have occurred, and was returned with the fragments of remains to the U.S. Army mortuary in Saigon. Somehow it managed to survive the crash.
Yeah.
Here we have the actual Western Union telegram that was sent to Dad's father, Walter Cordero, in Santa Barbara.
Now they sent this to him before they talked to your mom, or
no? They delivered this to him at the same time that the Air Force personnel were there talking to Mom. Okay. It was a very coordinated effort. Dad's parents were divorced, so Walter and Helen, Dad's father and mother, living separately, were both given this Western Union telegram, while at the same time there were knocks on the door for the Cordero family and the Lovelace family.
Yeah.
But that's the actual Western Union telegram today.
A great old person she was. Big heart, like I said, big smile. She will drop anything just to talk, to help anybody out. So she was always that person that if you needed her, she was there. Don't take time for granted. You never know. You never know what's going to happen in a couple of minutes. Always tell the person you love her. Always tell the person you care. Mm-hmm. Give her a hug, because you never know when it's going to be the last time. Mm-hmm. So